Gemini is Google's answer to ChatGPT. It embeds conversational AI in Android apps with minimal code. This video provides beginner tips for building your first Gemini app. We'll cover best practices and troubleshooting for working with the API, which seems simple yet has key nuances. Whether making your initial Gemini app or hitting roadblocks with existing experiments will set you up for success. Let's get started. Tip number 1. Request your API key. The first thing you need to work with Gemini is an API key which identifies you and enables access. You'll have to agree to some basic terms providing contact info and configuring billing. Don't worry, though Gemini is still in an introductory phase, so the API is free as long as you stick to reasonable usage levels. Tip 2. Use the project wizard. Okay, so you have your API key, now what? The easiest way to get up and running is to leverage the Android Studio built-in Gemini's project wizard. Inside Android Studio, click File, then New Project, then under Add an activity to mobile. Select Gemini API Start a Project. Give your app a name, hit Next, and paste in your API key when prompted. This wizard automatically sets up all the code, permissions, and dependencies needed to integrate with Gemini. It's by far the fastest way to get an example working so you can experiment. Basically, the wizard eliminates a ton of tedious boilerplate. Tip number 3. Structure your prompts. Alright, with the wizard taking care of the heavy lifting, you can now focus on the most critical part, the prompts. Prompts are basically the text strings you pass to Gemini describing what you want it to do. Think of it like giving instructions to a very eager assistant. The clarity and specificity of your prompts drastically impacts the relevance of the AI's response. Here are some key prompt writing tips. Clearly state what type of response you expect: a description, a list of products, a creative slogan. Tip number 4. Send your first request. Now for the exciting part. Make your first actual Gemini request. With your project set up, it only takes a few lines of code. First, instantiate your generative model. This represents Gemini. Use Gemini Pro for the standard model. Then create a content struct to hold your prompt pieces. You can paste text, images, etc. Finally, call model that generates content while passing your content struct. This triggers Gemini to analyze your prompt and formulate a response. Tip number 5. Handle responses. Alright, Gemini has churned away at your prompt. Now, what comes back? Well, the generated content method returns another content struct containing Gemini's response broken into parts. It may provide just one response part or multiple candidates for you to choose from. Each part could then include text, images, audio, and more depending on your original request. Tip number 6. Start small and iterate. When you're first getting familiar with Gemini, we highly recommend starting small rather than dreaming up some grandiose app idea out of the gates. Begin by using the wizard to help you build a shell app with a simple input box for text prompts. Get comfortable generating text responses, validate you can correctly display them. Start by having Gemini introduce itself in different languages. Then move to the basic Q&A like, what's the weather like today? And how far away is the moon? Simple fact-based questions. Once you have the basic single-turn interactions down, attempt some multi-turn dialogue by providing context and asking Gemini to build on it, almost like a storytelling game between you. Slowly add variables controlling the dialogue flow based on user input and previous chat history. This will really flex your prompt's formulation skills. Tip number 7. Troubleshoot issues. Alright, let's shift gears and talk about troubleshooting. Because while Gemini is extremely powerful, you will inevitably run into some hiccups. Being able to debug problems is crucial. First, always thoroughly read any error messages. The API docs provide guidances on common scenarios. For example, you might hit request throttling limits if sending too many prompts or authentication failure if your key is incorrect. For logic issues in Gemini's actual responses, tweak your prompt's wording and provide clearer guidelines. Adding some boundaries often helps. You can also trim down images to reduce noise. Lastly, hop on the Gemini developer forums to search existing threads or post new questions on problems not covered yet. The community will be your best resource as things progress. Tip number 8. Review usage limits. Briefly, we want to mention checking the usage limits Google imposes on you so you don't get caught off guard. As we said earlier, Gemini is currently free for reasonable use, but there are thresholds where you'll get charged per 1,000 requests. For example, going beyond 60 requests per 100 seconds triggers billing. Just something to keep in mind for context. Now, what exactly constitutes a request? Basically, each call to generate content counts as one request. So, if your app allows users to submit 10 prompts in a row to get AI-generated descriptions, that would be 10 requests. Requests also accumulate across models. So, sending 2 prompts to Gemini Pro and 3 prompts to Gemini Vision totals 5 requests. For personal learning and smaller projects, you realistically don't need to worry. But if building production apps, monitor your traffic. Tip number 9. Try other Gemini models. Throughout this video, I focus exclusively on the baseline Gemini Pro model for simplicity. But we briefly want to mention Google offers other specialized model flavors with expanded capabilities you can experiment with. For example, Gemini Vision analyzes images and documents to provide extra content. This allows prompts based on photos beyond just passing them in as is. Vision can extract concepts, text, and attributes from the image itself. So, you could show Gemini a screenshot of a mobile app and ask what functionality does this app provide to users, and it can intelligently identify components and interactions. This opens the door to some really cool visual query types of apps. Think almost a visual search engine powered by AI. Similarly, Gemini Text is optimized specifically for advanced text generation, classification, semantic search, and more. So even more advanced grammar, writing and summarization, etc. We're talking automatically generated multi-page research papers with citations based on an outline, turning bullet points into a full blog posts, intelligently answering questions about a long-form text corpus. The point is that each model has specialties, so think about your end goal and data types rather than just defaulting to Gemini Pro. Although we'd still recommend starting with Pro to grasp the basics, but once you have the foundations down, consider which other Gemini would be best suited to take your app to the next level based on what you want to accomplish. The sky is really the limit here. Alright everyone, that's a wrap of our beginner's advice for harnessing Gemini AI in your Android apps. We aim to provide a solid foundation to get you started. Now the possibilities are endless based on your imagination and effort that you put in. We think Gemini will open up so many unique use cases beyond basic chatbots. Direct-on-device ML providing real-time creative guidance moves mobile technology to a whole new level. As always, let us know if you have any questions down below. We're aiming to roll out more Gemini content soon. We may even attempt building a digital art assistant, so make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.